Work-life balance is something we all like to have, and a career is something we also like to have. At least this applies to many people who are listening to this podcast, as this is a business podcast. And of course, now we have numerous challenges and we see them all the time. How do we bring together an attitude of work-life balance and an approach to work-life balance which actually works in our daily businesses? And at the same time, we aim to have a career. Is that possible? And of course, when we look into what's happening right now, at the moment, organizations are aiming to deal with the new situation after the pandemic restrictions, because let's face it, we are now facing the reality of an end of the pandemic restrictions, or at least we have very few pandemic restrictions, often based on vaccination status or similar. So when we now face getting back to the normal working world, we are talking about new working models, either new models of work or, unfortunately, also pseudo-new models of work. So first, thank you very much for everyone emailing me about this topic. I saw some great organizations and I contacted them, and we will talk to some organizations in the future. But also, and we did already before, remember when we interviewed Reddit from Silicon Valley with one of their engineering managers. Also, we saw some examples which were not great. And first, of course, when you email me, I guarantee you 100% anonymity. And also, we are not here to talk down on organizations. So please refrain from sending me emails and saying, oh, all these companies of that sector are all bad. That's not the case. It's never the case that they are all bad or all good. And now we want to focus on what actually are the results we see. And by the way, if you really want to see what the results are, an amazing interview which we just published yesterday with Matt Edwards from Manchester, a young person. And as you know, this is one of the few podcasts where we don't talk about the young generation. Of course, we also talk about them, but we talk with them. So I interviewed Matt Edwards, who I know from Manchester, someone who was in beginning 20s, and his life situation was that he had a good degree and he had a contract working for an organization in his hand, and then the pandemic hit. And we, of course, all had consequences from the pandemic, but we need to see what are the real consequences for young people. How is life going for young people when the pandemic hit, and what happened to them? Because the pandemic for them will be the most significant cut in their life they have seen, and everything they will do in the future will be based on what they remember from that time and how organizations behaved. So I highly recommend listening to the interview yesterday with Matt Edwards, published on this channel. And when you are able to listen to the German channel as well, the German channel I interviewed Ben Schulz from an agency talking about personal branding, because as a leader you are a brand inside and outside your organization. So if you're able to speak German, highly recommend to listen to that podcast as well. But now, of course, we have to see what are the problems we face and how can we do better in the working world. So problem number one often is that management forces people, directly or indirectly, they force people to simply work more hours. And the assumption they have always is when you work more hours is that you are a better contributor to the organization's goals. If I would ask you, what do you pay people for? Is it for staying 60 hours a week? Or is it for getting the work done? Obviously, you would not say you pay people just to stay longer. Still, there is a group of leaders in nearly every organization that focuses a lot on sitting there for more hours. And often they have the wrong assumption, and we're getting to their approach of thinking in a bit. Often people say, I stayed longer, so you have to stay longer when you want to have a career. And often this is accompanied, and that is the third part of the problem, after saying, first you force people to work longer, then your thinking always starts from, I did that in the past, so you have to do that in the future, which is the wrong approach to pretty much anything, especially when it comes to innovation. But often this is accompanied with an astonishing amount of embarrassing, motivational, inspirational quotes, which have no content or substance whatsoever. I just give you two examples. Example number one, which happened quite frequently when I see the emails I receive. People say, or leaders say in an organization, career happens here beyond the 40-hour working week. That's example number one. Or example number two is, when you want to learn, you have to get out of your comfort zone. You most likely have heard both of these sentences, both of these phrases during your time in the organization you work. And the derivation people have often is a leader derives from their own history. This is how I had to deal with it, and now you have to deal with it the same way. And that, of course, cannot be what we focus on in the future. And of course, now we have to talk about how we do better. And of course, there are certain means you can implement to help. You can offer training, seminars, workshops, coachings, consulting. I now had, when you have professional speakers for your event, that of course helps as well. I had my first larger gigs now after the pandemic. It was quite nice to meet people speaking in front of a couple of hundred, in front of a couple of hundred people again. Of course, when you want to have a bit of a more of a long-term approach, you can have project interim managers. And when you are interested in any of these, just drop me an email, nb@nb-networks.com, nb@nb-networks.com, and then we can start a chat. And of course, people, especially during the last weeks, often ask me, well, Niels, you announced something more is coming at the end of the year. Yes. So first, we don't have the end of the year so far, so I'm not going to spoil it. You will have a nice surprise very soon. And it will be available, as I said before, via the channel which I use every Wednesday. Every Wednesday, there's an email with more resources and, of course, more information. expert.nb-networks.com. You just go on expert.nb-networks.com, and there you just put in your email address, and every Wednesday, 6 a.m. in the morning, you receive an email. It's 100% content, ad-free guarantee, and then you see what will be available in the future, because it will be announced very soon. And of course, now we have to look at how can we do better. So step number one, when you want to do something better, you have to give people a proper, valid and reliable, fact-based reason why they should do so. And I just give you, I just stick to the phrase which I mentioned before. People say you have to stay longer or more hours in the office because that will progress your career. That, of course, is not necessarily true, but in some settings it is. And I just give you an example where a leader said that, and this leader in that setting, in that situation, in that organization was absolutely right. An organization selling a software, I can't mention which one because, of course, client work is strictly confidential. It's a software that solves a problem on the client side based on how to deal with numbers. And it's a very complex software product. Available in different languages, available also in different legal settings, more than 40 different modules. It is very complex and very difficult to learn. And of course, when you want to learn it as quickly as possible, because you want to have a career, and with that career, you want to have a higher payment than anyone else in the organization or any of your colleagues probably. When you put in more hours, then of course you will learn the software quicker. So when you stay in, let's say when you do your job and the learning, and you say you stay 35 hours, which is the standard working contract in many Central European countries now, or you say you stay 45 or maybe 40 or 50 hours a week, you will learn quicker. And it's, by the way, exactly the same when you try to be good at any kind of hobby. For example, you want to be a good soccer player or football player or basketball player, or you want to be good at playing a certain instrument. You are automatically aware of the fact that putting more effort into the learning will, in most cases, lead to a better result. Unfortunately, often people say, oh, the 40-hour working week is my maximum, which is fine, by the way. But don't complain when other people who put in more hours in that situation will learn quicker, will be promoted quicker, and will have a higher income. Because learning, of course, also is depending on the effort. You can't learn quicker with less hours. You can't have an extraordinary learning curve with a standard input of learning hours. And of course, I don't say that the amount of hours can be extended indefinitely. So it's the core message here is not that you just sit there for 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, 100 hours a week. Because let's face it, between hour 90 and 100, you probably don't learn anything except how to survive on Red Bull or any kind of other energy drink available on the market, sitting in front of a TV screen or a computer screen. That's not the core message here. But a certain additional effort will lead to more success in the future, of course. And that's also the important message here. It has to happen on your free will. No one should force you. You have a working contract, and the contract, normally an amount of hours are mentioned, and that's what you're hired for. That's what you get paid for. And when you say, I only do that, perfectly fine, but please don't feel entitled to a career in that organization in this case. Because, and that's now the second aspect, and this is where leaders have to step up, of course we have to offer real learning. And real learning happens internally and externally. So and this happened when someone wrote me an email. Someone said I had an onboarding process which was 75% looking videos, just watching videos. And that, of course, is not a great onboarding process. You can make a certain share automated or via video. However, it's not everything you can offer. You can't say that people watch videos and then they suddenly know everything they should do. Leaders have to step up and then invest the hours as well. When people say, I'm willing to learn more, leaders have to deliver more. And of course, as you know, from a certain level of expertise, people tend to become self-employed. So often people are not looking for employment. So bringing in external experts is part of the game, because people feel appreciated when they see that you bring in external experts. They see that the term we invest in our people is not just marketing. They see it really happens. People have to deliver on their promises. And that means making real learning offers internally and externally beyond the classic learning video, which cannot be the only option here. And of course, and that's aspect number 3, when there's any kind of criticism, then you have to offer a solution to that. And I give you an example of how not to do it. Exactly with that example, someone openly addressed, because his organization told him when there's any kind of criticism, address us, and we are very open for any kind of criticism. And the person said, look, my onboarding process so far is 75% learning videos. I just sit in front of a computer screen 75-80% of my time, and that's not how I want to work. Could I please have someone who explains it to me in person, maybe some external expert to give me a different point of view? And the first reaction from that organization was, do you know how much that costs? Where should we get the hours from our leaders? We don't have the time for that. Don't you think that you should be more in a position of being thankful for being offered to learn here? And of course, when your first reaction on criticism is that you feel personally attacked, although some of your employees just gave you a proper and fact-based reason what you could do better in the future, and you say, we don't have time for that, while in return you expect time from your employees, you shouldn't be surprised that what happens there, and that's what happened here as well in that case, that a person is now actively looking, and now, just a couple of days ago, signed a contract in another organization where from the very beginning this person made clear that during the onboarding process, that person does not want to sit in front of learning videos and watch them for 80% of the time. And that competitor was very surprised to hear that anyone would do that. So you lose people when you don't focus on people, because people don't leave organizations, people leave people, as we said before already. And it's very important, and that is the 4th aspect of how to do it better. The orientation of anything you do has to adapt to the life model of the person you're working with. First, positive response to that, because now I immediately know some people will now sit there listening to this podcast, rolling their eyes and saying, oh, do we have to listen to all the emotional stuff and put like nice plans in the office so they feel better, and maybe send them a care package to their home because otherwise they feel left out? You can do that kind of cynic approach as often as you want. It doesn't lead to anything, and also it disqualifies you as a leader completely. When you want to work with someone, and by the way, when you work with clients, you automatically do that. You would never tell a client, oh, who do you think you are we a little whiny today? You wouldn't say that. So focus on the life model of your employees, of the people you work with, because that, in the first place, will lead to a lower employee turnover. In return, of course, you save on recruiting, have a higher productivity. And by the way, when you do not have a higher productivity, it means that your processes are inefficient, ineffective, or both. And that's what your leaders have to figure out. It is very important now that you cannot simply say, oh, you want to have a career here, put in more hours, then you get more money, and there you have your career. Many people, and I just had a coaching last week, where a young person, highly qualified, highly talented, the candidate you wish you want to have in your organization, and as soon as I mentioned money, that person very clearly said, I need to have that amount of money. With my talent, I get way more already, because the market rate for my specialization in data science is way higher. So from the beginning, I make way more money than I need. These are my hobbies. That is my life. So making more money does not motivate me in the slightest. Then of course I ask, what does motivate you? And that person then said, I want to work with a motivated team, with an engaged team that focuses on customers' needs, offers great learning. So I see myself developing in a better direction and see that my skills become better and better. Money wasn't mentioned at all. Of course, no one will show up for less than market rate. Why should they? Because often people say, oh, when money's not important, you could work for minimum wage. No, why should they? They know they don't have to. So why should they? Stop being ironic, sarcastic, and cynic towards a whole generation. The orientation of your organization has to happen towards the life model, has to adapt towards the life model of the people you work with. And that, of course, is challenging when you have different generations and different people in place. But that is why you need leaders, and that is why you need leadership. Because otherwise, we don't need people just supervising other people if they do their work. If that is your job, that you only supervise people, then you should be prepared that sooner or later you will be replaced by a camera system and face recognition and some sort of artificial intelligence. It is very important that the orientation of your organization adapts to the life model of the people you work with. It is now very important, especially when it comes to how do you work as a leader and how do actually people perceive what happened during the pandemic and how the working world is right now. I again can only tell you, yesterday the interview with Matt Edwards, I can tell you, if someone from a business podcast where since it was started more than 30,000 people listened to, if someone would have asked me, hey, do you want to tell your story in front of that podcast although you're only 20 something years old, I wouldn't have the courage to do that. So it is very important that we listen to young people and not only talk about them, but talk with them. So I can only highly recommend, listen to the interview yesterday with Matt Edwards. It's very important that you know how young people perceive what's happening right now so you can adapt to the future of what they are looking for in the working world. And also when you are able to listen to the German podcast, you as a leader are a brand internally and externally. And Ben Schultz from the Werdewelt agency talked about that on the German podcast yesterday. I'm looking forward to having discussions with you. I know this is not easy, and I know this is a topic which puts challenges into many organizations. Just send me an email to nb@nb-networks.com, nb@nb-networks.com, so we can have a nice discussion or a chat. And now it's important to apply everything you heard in your organization. Of course, if you need some help, drop me an email and we can have a chat about that as well. It's now important to apply everything you heard in your organization. I wish you all the best applying what you heard in your company, in your association, in your corporation, wherever you work. It's important that you do not only plan to do something, but apply what you learned, apply what you've listened to, apply what you just acquired as additional knowledge. Because only what is applied in your organization really counts towards making your organization a better one. I wish you all the best doing that. And now there's only one thing for me left to say. Thank you very much for your time.